सुशोभित है धरा, जिनसे है मानव का पथ प्रकाश ज्योति से भरा। वंदना उनकी करे जिनसे सुशोभित है धरा, जिनसे है मानव का पथ प्रकाश ज्योति से भरा। जिनसे दिशा हमको मिली नित मानवीय मार्ग की, पथ मिला निश्चित हमें थी कामना जिस मार्ग की। कृतज्ञता से सौम्यता की नित्य आई निरंतरा, जिनसे है मानव का पथ प्रकाश ज्योति से भरा। वंदना उनकी करे जिनसे सुशोभित है धरा। जिनका है चिंतन शुभ यही, कैसे हो मानव सुखमयी। प्रेरणा से जिनकी है मानव का जीवन सुखमयी। श्रद्धा समर्पित जिनसे आए मानवीय परंपरा, जिनसे है मानव का पथ प्रकाश ज्योति से भरा। वंदना उनकी करे जिनसे सुशोभित है धरा। सबके सुख की कामना ले रहती जिनकी कल्पना, निकली जिनसे मानवीय पथ हेतु निश्चित योजना। पूजता उन हेतु जिनसे है सुसज्जित वसुंधरा, जिनसे है मानव का पथ प्रकाश ज्योति से भरा। वंदना उनकी करे जिनसे सुशोभित है धरा।
Namaste. A very warm welcome to Madhyas Darshan, the English channel. It is with immense sense of gratitude towards Baba Shri A. Nagraj, the propounder of Madhyas Darshan Jivan Vidya, that we are starting this program today. My name is Rakesh Gupta. I live in Bangalore along with my wife Priyanka, our daughter Gunjan, and our elderly parents. We have been studying and practicing Madhyas Darshan for about 15 years now, working towards aligning our lives with its teachings. We also do our bit to share what we are learning. We had the good fortune of having had a fairly long and intense association with Babaji since 2004, which has shown direction and given purpose to our lives. Madhyas Darshan is the result of original exploratory research by Shri A. Nagraj of Amarkantak, India. He has positioned it as Vikalp or alternative of idealism and materialism, which also is the way this channel positions it. Our presentation here is in capacity as students of this body of knowledge. Madhyas Darshan literature was originally presented in Hindi language by Shri A. Nagraj. The idea over here is to build a firm and collaborative foundation for understanding and sharing our understanding of Madhyas Darshan in English medium. English has become the language of the world, and if we want to take Madhyas Darshan to the world, then we need to make a bridge for the English speaking people. We are trying to do that here. We feel the need for the world to take notice of the fundamental work that has happened in India, which is capable of showing the way out from the deadlock that it has reached and to an everlasting and happy and prosperous future for all human beings. As the first exercise towards this initiative, we will start with Jeevan Vidya Ek Parichaya book. We will transmit it on this Jeevan Vidya YouTube channel on every Sunday from 8:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. India time, starting 28th November 2020. Jeevan Vidya Ek Parichaya book is actually transcript of a workshop that Babaji conducted at Amvri Ashram at Charama, Bastar in October 1997, which is about 23 years back. We had recently webcasted it as a series on Jeevan Vidya YouTube channel. The presentation of English translation of Jeevan Vidya Ek Parichaya will be a collaborative effort. That is, multiple Prabodhaks will be presenting it. We currently have, apart from myself, Ajay Jain Bhaiya from Surat, Ashok Gopala Bhaiya from Raipur, Nivita Kakriya Didi from Delhi, Peter Penkala brother from Canada, Pradeep Ramancharla Bhaiya from Hyderabad, Surendra Pal Bhaiya from Raipur, and Priyanka, my wife, from Bangalore. In addition, we have a number of more people who will be joining this initiative in the due course. We intend to do about 10 pages in a session of about 1.5 hour duration. However, we will learn and revise the pace and frequency of these sessions as we go along. There is a draft version of translation that I had done of this book. The presenters would either read out from it or present it with their changes or present their own translation. I am very grateful to Babaji, his family, and the great many people who contributed and encouraged us for this initiative. Lastly, I want to thank you listeners for tuning into this program and listening to it. I sincerely hope that this program will help you in your study. We are together in our journey of learning, and let's join our efforts. Without much ado, let's now start our today's session of Jeevan Vidya Ek Parichaya. Jeevan Vidya, an introduction. My fellow human beings, I came to understand the ancient scriptures as a result of my own volition. I had no external pressure to do this. Upon understanding these scriptures, I wondered how this earth should be. From this arose the following proclamation within me. May the earth become heavenly and humans be as gods. May dharma, righteousness prevail and the good arise always. I want to share its context with you. My bodily journey started in a very laborious, devoted to seva, pious and highly venerated family in the Vedic tradition. As you are aware, every child that is born begins to follow the faith of their parents, comes to accept the constitution of one nation or another, gets offered the education available in their tradition, and tries to follow the path set out by their teachers. I too started going through all of this. Along with these, I found there were also dictates and sanctions of the tradition, like sit with these people, not with those, do this, don't do that. From the beginning and throughout my childhood, I was dissatisfied with such dogmas. This happened in my childhood itself. At first, they said, "You are still too young, you don't understand." But with time, their attitude towards me started to change. I felt my elders were not happy with me, and this became the first cause of my misery. But how was I to make them happy? If I did as they said, I couldn't help myself from judging against their own standards. I could also see that my elders were not happy all the time themselves while living with those protocols. That was the crux point. I started feeling that while my elders instructed me on what to do and what not to do, they were not happy all the time, whether they themselves adhered to those rules or not. Even though it was not possible to find more revered or more senior scholars than them anywhere. As a result of this situation, I concluded that I would never blindly follow the dictates and sanctions of tradition. It started becoming like a sacred oath for me. Another factor which got added to this was that my elders weren't able to convince me with use of reasoning. The more they failed, and the more my self-conceit grew. The growth in my conceit and my rejection of dictates happened side by side. Where will it all end? Now my elders started saying, this boy obstinately rejects our entire tradition and all our beliefs without having understood Vedas, our Vedanta, and our scriptures. How can it go on like this? They started worrying about all of this, and that became the second cause of my misery. Now what could I do? With no other path left for me, I chose to study Vedanta, which they believed to be the supreme knowledge. First section of this path is Karma Kand, which describes actions based on Vedic ideology. According to Vedas, karma is that which brings about heaven, and all other things are called something else. Second section is called Upasana Kand, which describes the rituals and ceremonies for becoming gods and goddesses. Third section, Gyan Kand, says knowledge alone is supreme. When I asked what is knowledge, the answer that came was knowledge of Brahm. Then what is Brahm? I inquired. They replied that you won't understand. I asked, without understanding Brahm, how could one realize it? Their answer was, the way to realize Brahm is to adhere to the dictates and sanctions in the scriptures. My elders then assured me that realization in Brahm happens in the state of Samadhi, wherein one gets the answers to all questions. I thus concluded that I must see the state of Samadhi for myself. There was no other choice left for me. There was no point arguing anymore. The matter of my agreeing or disagreeing with them now was of no consequence. I had to find answer to my questions. After thoroughly listening to Vedanta, the first question that formed in me was, what is bondage, bandhan, and what is salvation, moksha? They say that we live in bondage due to illusion, maya. Salvation is dissolution of Atma in the Brahma. Where did Atma come from? Then they said, Brahma itself resides in the hearts of Jivas in the form of Atma. They say Jiva has to ultimately achieve salvation and end the cycles of birth and death and the trips to heaven and hell. At this point, Atma would dissolve in Brahma. If Atma had to ultimately unite with Brahm, then why did Brahm bother to go and sit into the hearts of Jivas in the first place? I questioned. By this logic, when the first Jiva happened, at that time there would have been no Atma in it. Then what was the need for Brahm to go and sit inside it? This turned into a pointless argument. My elders started saying that I was arguing needlessly and I was not blindly accepting their dictates and sanctions. I said, you may be right, but you should still answer my questions. After this, they suggested that you will find answers to these questions also in the state of Samadhi. So what else then could be done? I gradually began to prepare my mind for Samadhi. All this started in 1944, and by 1946, I had become mentally prepared to pursue Samadhi. One more thing that was happening in that period was the conditions for Indian independence were becoming ripe. Then, as many of us had anticipated, the power got transferred from the British to the Indian people in 1947. There were many great visionaries and thinkers involved in the independence movement, but I also observed some detrimental changes that happened in them along with this success. This too pained me. Thereafter, one more hope got kindled. It was the hope that we, the Indian nation, will now have our own constitution, and perhaps that constitution will describe the character of an authentic human being. I kept thinking and hoping that the constitution would show us the way. I used to avidly follow all of the newspaper reports while the constitution was getting formulated. But by 1950, after having considered all their arguments, I had concluded that it was impossible to assess an authentic human being under this constitution. This conclusion was based on the fact that it had no description of an authentic human being's character. So, what could be done now? I had already accepted that all my questions on Vedanta will be answered in Samadhi. Thus, I concluded that this question will also get answered in that state. There was no need to argue with elders and scholars over this matter anymore. I concluded either I will get my answers in Samadhi, or if not, then consider my life as an offering for the sake of learning. There was one more person who became prepared for this endeavor, and that was my wife. We had heard about Amarkantak as a sacred place, as it is the place of the origin of river Narmada. Why not make one last attempt there? With this in mind, we made the journey to Amarkantak in 1950. After arriving here, I started my sadhana of Agam Tantra Upasana method. This is a method prescribed in scriptures for attaining Samadhi, wherein the aspirant visualizes gods and goddesses in parts of one's body. It is a matter of seeing them from one's own imagination and then performing their respective forms of worship. This activity of trying to see gods and goddesses in different parts of one's body is called Nyas. The formula given in the scriptures is becoming God, worship Godhead. Devo Bhutva Devam Yajmer. All this was told to me, and I prepared myself to do it with full honesty. I did the best that I could. In due time, I one day became free from the imagined proximity of gods and goddesses. I am, this awareness was there. I had no other sense. In that state, I had no thoughts that I have to achieve something, that I have something with me, and or that I have to do something. This was something new. It was a small event perhaps, which had happened. I remained in this state for a few hours, and the moment I became conscious of the body, I also became conscious of time. Thereupon I recognized that I had had no sense of time, place, or body during that period. I had no thoughts of any sort in that duration. This I believed had happened with me. Afterwards, I started thinking that perhaps I have achieved Samadhi, and so I started repeating that state every day for many hours, awaiting the answers to my questions. But I did not find answers even after waiting for a full year. This was the second major failure. The first failure was that I had not found any answers from Vedanta. The highest scholars in my family were unable to answer my questions. Now, even in Samadhi, I did not find any answers. Now, what could I do? Where could I go now? It was no use blaming anyone, and so I lived through this deadlock. One day, I felt I had really listened to the state of Samadhi, and I had become confident of having achieved it as well. But how would I be able to precisely describe that state to others? How could I testify to it? What is the evidence of my accomplishment? If there is nothing in the state of samadhi which could be described, then how could I present any evidence of it to the world? In order to dispel this difficulty, I chose to perform sanyam to test my having achieved samadhi. This instruction is also there from elders in the scriptures. It is mentioned in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, Dharana, Dhyan, Samadhi, Trayam Ekatratvat Sanyama. The three statuses of Dharana, Dhyan, and Samadhi, when brought together at one place, results in Sanyam. Anybody can verify this reference. Whatever is written there about Sanyam was not acceptable to me. Therefore, I improvised on the method of Sanyam, which is by reversing the prescribed order of the three statuses to Samadhi, Dhyan, and Dharana, and carried it out. As a result of this, I started seeing each and every bit of existence in front of me. Seeing here means understanding. I have seen the whole sequence of emergence. From a single atom to the entire earth, I have seen the innate order of existence and the way of its emergence, and I can help you to understand it. This state of authenticity has become established in me. Within the sequence of all the different types of atom, I also saw the Jivan atom. The Jivan atom is present in the same way in me, in you, in the person who is going to be born today and the person who is going to die today. It was understood that Jivan exists even after it has left the body, and it exists while it is with the body. Why does Jivan live with the body? I saw that it wants to evidence its presence by using body as an instrument. That is the crux. What is it that Jivan wants to evidence? The answer I discovered is that Jivan first wants to live, and then it wants to become happy. Along with becoming happy, it wants to produce evidence of that happiness. These are the three stages. The first stage of wanting to live is achieved in the animal world. The next two stages of wanting happiness and evidencing happiness are only achievable within the human being and nowhere else. I saw this very thoroughly, and the discovery of it satisfied me immensely. Thereafter, I discovered the formula of living with happiness as a human being. It is about living in tune with universal order. The material world, called as material order, is in solid, liquid, and gaseous states. The bio-order is comprised of all organisms composed of organic cells that are based on multitude of chemical substances and fluids. Bodies of animals and humans are composed of these fluid and chemical substances only. Human bodies and animal bodies are composed of physiochemical organic matter alone. I saw the difference between an animal kind body and a human kind body is that the human body has a fully enriched brain. Having a fully enriched brain means Jivan can express itself through it in a multidimensional way. I have seen this very precisely. After seeing all of this, it occurred to me that animal kind is an order in itself by being in line with their definition. In the same way, human beings have their own definition and order, wherein human happiness is a real possibility. Along with these developments, I also found answers to the questions which had started me on this trajectory. What is salvation and what is bondage? I found Jivan controls human body in order to achieve and evidence happiness, but for that human being first needs to gain wisdom. It is only upon achieving wisdom that a human being can evidence orderly living, which is happiness, which is not possible in any other way. Huge groups of people used to turn up to observe me while I was doing sadhana. Sadhana means the spiritual practices in pursuit of samadhi. They used to appreciate the discipline, the restraint, and the precision in my living. But I am testifying here that my mind actually had no restraint during that period. Until I had achieved samadhi, there was no restraint in my mind. I only had the resolve that I was there to do sadhana and I was not to do anything foolish. But it was not that foolish or stray thoughts did not come to my mind at all. On this basis, I can assure you that there is no method in existence by which a human being can refrain from stray thoughts right up till samadhi is achieved. No one invites such thoughts, and the one who is doing sadhana definitely does not. I also did not want those thoughts, but they kept coming. This difficulty is faced by all aspirants of sadhana. One tolerates stray thoughts to the extent that one can, and after one cannot, one does not. That's all that I can say. I discovered the following answer to my question regarding bondage and salvation. Bondage is ignorance or delusion, while salvation is to become free from delusion. Ignorance is our living like animals and holding up animalistic conduct as our ideal. If we model our living based on the way animals live, it would naturally be a delusion for us. The prevalent traditions force us to live in this ignorance. This is evident in our present education, which consists of sex-obsessed psychology, consumption-obsessed sociology, and profit-obsessed economics. It is ironic that parents sending their children to such education still expect them to become good, moral, and cultured. Where is the correlation between the expectation of parents and the content of present education? I found an answer to my second question as well, regarding the definition of national character. Each unit in existence is orderly in its essence and participant in the universal order. I found the path for achieving such orderliness in human being as well. I discovered the definition of human being. Humanness is in the form of an awakened human being's work and behavior. When we formulate and describe an awakened human being's work and behavior, it becomes the sociology or the constitution for humanity. Imparting the understanding of humane conduct is the essence of this sociology. I discovered the universal code of conduct for the human being, which is the basis of a humanistic constitution. National character can be recognized within this constitutional framework. A human being, upon becoming liberated from delusion, lives as a human being ought to live, and it is this liberation that constitutes salvation. Salvation is not about showing miracles, nor is it about giving blessings to the world. There are no miracles in existence. I have seen this fact precisely. Even today, millions of people are trapped in the delusion of curses and blessings. There is only one true response to this, and it is that the moment one takes a single step in the direction of awakening, all curses, all remorse, and all sins of delusion become nullified, leaving no trace behind. This can be understood mathematically. One could do a math question wrong 1,000 times over, but once one learns to do it right, the answer remains correct regardless of how many times you redo it. Before one has learned to do it right, one keeps making mistakes. A person could make a new mistake with every attempt until they have learned how to do it right. If a math question is given to 1,000,000 children and they all do it right, then they will all come with the same answer. If all of them were to do it wrong, then we could get 1,000,000 different answers from them. Anyone can easily do this survey. With this, I discovered one more formula. We humans are one, united in the right, and many divided in the wrong. When I understood existence, I discovered another great formula. Existence has only two kinds of realities. First, there are things which can be counted as units, which we can call nature. And secondly, there is a reality which pervades everywhere and which anyone can understand in a moment. Each unit of nature is submerged, surrounded, and imbued in this second reality. This reality can be called the omnipresent. The units of nature exist in two categories, insentient and sentient. Animal kind and humankind constitute the sentient world, while the material order and bio order constitute the insentient world. The insentient world includes all the minerals, soils, metals, and organic cellular forms. All of these things always remain imbued, remain submerged, and remain surrounded in the omnipresent. I have seen this precisely. There is no provision in existence of separating units of nature from the omnipresent. Human being cannot create something for which there is no provision in existence. Any human accomplishment which overlooks the natural usefulness as provisioned in existence would only result in destruction. For example, we use so much of the natural resources to produce war material, but through this we could accomplish nothing other than destruction of both human beings and of environment. The scientists are slowly beginning to recognize this. Had they understood it sooner, perhaps the human race could have achieved happiness and prosperity. A river crosses many banks until it meets the ocean. Perhaps it was a matter of destiny that human beings would come around to this manner of understanding after many failed attempts. First, it was mystical idealism, which gave some relief, but that did not suffice. Thereafter, we came into the grips of materialism. But the relief from materialism also proved insufficient for happiness and prosperity of all human beings. That is the crisis of today. Humankind has not found a complete form of relief from these two ideologies, and so naturally a third step is needed. I had found the following formula as answer to my question on salvation and bondage. The human being becomes liberated from delusion upon becoming wise. Now the question becomes, how does a human being become wise? I examined myself and found there was no source of any bondage or delusion left in me. So why not work to bring about this state in everyone? What would happen if all human beings became liberated in this way? I thought then the vision which I had shared with you earlier would get realized, and earth will be a heaven and humans will be as gods. Righteousness or dharma will prevail and the good will arise always. The goodness could become established in the form of a living tradition for humankind ad infinitum. Thus, I started examining myself whether I would be able to communicate all of this knowledge content and to see whether people have a need for it or not. This movement of Jivan Vidya started after determining both that there was a need for such a wisdom and that I now have the ability to communicate it. I gained the assurance within myself that the code of humane conduct can be incorporated into the constitution of every nation, and that if and when that is accomplished, humanness will become evident as the national character. I myself am rooted in humanness. I am proficient and living evidence of this knowledge. I have understood existence and can impart that understanding to you. I have understood Jivan and I can impart that understanding to you. I have understood humane conduct and can impart that understanding to you. One becomes wise as a result of having understood these three topics and thereby achieves salvation or becomes liberated from the bondage of delusion. My elders had said that salvation means liberation from transmigration to heaven and hell. However, in reality, no one ever went elsewhere, nor will anyone come from elsewhere. All Jivan remains in existence even after death, and it remains in existence during one's lifetime while controlling a body. A piece of charcoal remains in other forms even after it turns into ash. The scholars of physics and chemistry must have understood this concept. If not, they are bound to understand it in future. At the fundamental level, annihilation of any existential reality is impossible. On this basis alone, I say, if earth remains firm and if humans live on it with wisdom, it would lead to the universal and eternal well-being of all. Humane conduct is central to the manifestation of this vision. The most significant benefit being that humankind, with this wisdom, shall be able to live on this earth forever without damaging it, harming it, or tearing its guts apart. The way of such living also emerges from this very wisdom, and the earth is saved from destruction. So we did read about 10 pages of the translation, and I thought that we should have some free talk also after the serious reading of translation. So Babaji was born in 1920, 14th January 1920, in Agrahar, Hassan district of Karnataka in South India. That place is not very far from where I am living in Bangalore. It's about 5-6 hours by road. That time India was still under the British rule, and it was a very tumultuous period. First World War had just got over, and the seeds of Second World War had already been sown. Communism and socialism thoughts were gaining popularity, especially in Russia, where the revolution had just got over. His was a family of Vedic scholars, but he used to say that there was no other thing inside his family apart from that. That is what the sound reverberated in his village. In the childhood, he used to say that he would wake up early in the morning, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and would sit under the light of a lamp and recite the hymns of Vedas. That was how he was that was the environment in which he was born. It was a small village of Brahmins. Agrahar means the village of Brahmins. So that is where he was born. It was a very small place, but it was a very well-off family. I mean, there was abundance in that family, which they used to, as they said, there were 3 things he used to say, that Shram, which is the manual effort, Seva, which is serving others with devotion, and Gyan, which is the scholarliness. These 3 were very strongly imbued in the tradition in which he was born, and what he felt was that Shram and Seva, that is the manual effort, physical labor, and doing the Seva, was something which was completely acceptable to him, and he had imbibed them. But he had questions on the knowledge aspect of his family tradition, and because he used to ask questions and he would not agree on blindly following the dictates and sanctions of the tradition. He said that you need to explain to me with reasoning. You cannot just ask me to blindly follow the dictates and sanctions. So when he would ask the questions, it would actually reach the point that they would say that this is a pointless argument, and you would knowledge cannot be described in words, it needs to be realized. And that is what it was. So it was all leading to that if you need to have the knowledge that what we are talking about, then it needs to be realized, and the way to realize it is either you follow the sanctions and dictates of the thing, and the realization of that actually happens in the state of samadhi. So in that sense, all the directions that from his family and also from the scriptures and the venerated gurus at that time had made it. That's how he actually made up his mind for pursuing the state of samadhi. This was an interesting time, and people like Raman Maharshi, Jagat Guru Chandrasekhar Bharati, and Sri Aurobindo, they were alive at that time, and he had actually approached them in the course of his inquiries and tried to find answers for them. So all of that actually led him to the conclusion that this is where he needs to pursue the state of samadhi, which requires him to be renouncing the world, and for that he basically did leave all that he had set up. He was from a well-off family, and he had a highly rewarding occupation. He left all of that and for the pursuit of knowledge. He also was a person who said that the knowledge needs to have practical use, and it needs to be part of the living tradition. It cannot be that you have one world or for the spirituality and one world for actually doing the things. There needs to be integrity in both in terms of what is spiritual and what is in the day-to-day, everyday work and behavior. So there needs to be an integrity between the two. So when India became independent, and there was a talk of Indian Constituent Assembly was formed for framing the Indian Constitution. So he had this question that his family has this tradition of hundreds of years, and they keep talking of this knowledge, but why can't they give some formulation for Indian Constitution? And so he has assembled hundreds of Vedic scholars and asked them to give some formula for nation building from their scriptures. And these people were not able to give any formula for that. Somehow the practical world and spiritual world were separate. That's the message it seemed. That is the essence of mystical nature of the ancient spirituality. It doesn't entertain knowledge, logic, and it doesn't connect with the everyday world. That was his difficulty, and he felt that if the knowledge is there, then it needs to be having an application, it needs to be part of the living tradition. So those were the things, and he added this question also as part of his inquiry, as he had said, and that he said that if Samadhi has answers to all the questions, then it should be having answer to this question as well. And Um, yeah. So, a word about Mataji, also his wife, Srimati Nagratna Sharma. Babaji would give full credit for his sadhana's success to Mataji, who remained as his guardian and a pillar of perseverance. He was very he actually gives the full credit. She remained in these pages. Babaji also talked about samadhi, and he declares that samadhi is not the state of realization or anubhav in knowledge, which is a deviation from what ancient spiritualism says, which says put samadhi at the pinnacle of sadhana, which is the purpose of sadhana. Samadhi, he says, is the state of nothingness where one's wants, thoughts, and desires become silent. It is the state of absolute silence. And he says that silence is not knowledge, since that doesn't give any answers. So in that way, there is no evidence of silence. So what he has done is that he actually improvised on the method of Sanyam after having achieved Samadhi by reversing the three statuses of Dharana, Dhyan, and Samadhi. And this resulted in his seeing the reality of existence as it is. Existence is revealed. His readiness became such that he was able to see the reality as it is. And that is the knowledge that he then articulated in words. So with this, we will end the session of today, and we will meet next week. I hope you found this session useful. Please do share your feedback on how we can make this better. Thank you very much.